Hello, and welcome to another episode of AP Taylor Swift, the podcast for Swifties who like to dive a layer deeper into the music. So lean in close, turn up your volume, because class is in session. We're your hosts. I'm Monty.
I'm Jen.
And I'm Jody.
And we are your unofficial professors of Taylor Swift. Hello, and welcome to another amazing episode of AP Taylor Swift. We are fired up today because we are just coming off the heels of a very exciting episode. We just released our cities episode last week. This is going to be a conversation that's in continuation of that one. So if you have not listened to that episode, definitely go back listen. I think we have some pretty ridiculous moments. We're deep diving Paris today, which I would just like to say again is my favorite city in the world. Unpopular opinion.
You are not alone. It's not an unpopular opinion. You are not alone.
But one of the fun things about this song that we actually left off on in our last discussion was that it's a song about Paris, which is why we did it in the cities episode. But the song is actually also at the same time not about Paris. It's about people who are not physically in Paris. They're just pretending like they're in Paris. So yeah, excited for this conversation. If you like us and love us and want to tell other people about us, please share with your friends. Tell us why you love us. We really like to hear from you.
Tell us why you love us.
Yeah, like share on social media and just, don't keep the love to yourself. Share it.
Yeah, so we always talk about who's this author, who's the speaker, who are they speaking to, and what's the purpose. We come back to the purpose. Jody is also already in exhausted mom mode from me and Monzi in the last episode. So this is going to be a fun energy.
Well, I'll kick it off then.
But I was going to say, though, with this one, too, we can discuss all of those. We might just want to start at the top because the way that it sets the scene is
really cool.
Very unique. Yeah.
I'm just going to read it for those who are new to this song. And this is in quotes. Your ex-friend's sister met someone at a club and he kissed her. Turns out it was that guy you hooked up with ages ago, some wannabe Z-lister. And all the outfits were terrible. 2003 unbearable. Did you see the photos? End quote. No, I didn't. But thanks, though. That confused me so much when I first, the first 3 or 4 times I listened to this song.
It took me a few tries to realize what was in quotes and then what was her responding.
This is where printing it out and being a millennial with a printer is really helpful.
Millennial with a printer, a rare breed.
There's 3 of us, so.
Who's saying the quotes?
I don't know if it matters who's saying the quotes. I think it's the idea that there is this thing in quotes that really grounds us in this present day reality mundaneness of the world.
I love mundaneness.
Yeah, that's what it felt like.
Somebody is gossiping.
And it's
just some random blah, 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 blah.
Your ex-friend's sister, wannabe Z-lister.
Z-lister, yeah.
Ex-friend's sister is a loaded line.
It's like some distant friend. Some
someone
distant
who
human.
you're no longer friends with. Their sister.
Yeah, so that line, the whole section is obviously about all of this drama, but it immediately starts your ex-friend's sister and you're like, oh, so something's gone down. For sure, we know that.
But with somebody really irrelevant. So that's where I like the mundaneness.
Yeah.
In every line, there's some hints to make it seem extra mundane.
It gets more and more ridiculous and
irrelevant.
Irrelevant. Irrelevant is actually the perfect word there. Wannabe Z-lister, irrelevant. 2003 unbearable. That is irrelevant. And then did you see the photos? As if this is the most important thing in the world. And our speaker says, no, I didn't. But
But thanks though. Yeah. And so then we get into the actual speaker that's going to be
in love that I might stop breathing.
In the song.
But it sets the stage for where our speaker is, because she is just pushing this mundane irrelevance of what is the everyday away. She's like, does not matter. What matters is what's internal or what's happening with this other person in my world, my tiny little world.
It just reminds me a little bit of when work drama happens, when someone's like, oh, all these people aren't getting along. And you're like, okay, does that affect my project? No. Okay. Good luck. I don't care.
You and I are different employees. I'm the one who's like, oh my God, wait, what happened? So who said what?
Sometimes I want to know. Sometimes I'm like, I have no energy for this. Please don't talk to me.
That person is so, I don't care about this. because they're in love.
they're in love.
Right.
But then it turns into like a very obsessive love very, very quickly because drew a
Very
map on
quickly.
your bedroom ceiling. Like you don't have time for mundane stories, but you have time to draw a map on your bedroom ceiling.
We get a lot of that language in, I think it's Reputation. Is it where like carve my name into your bedpost in dress? So this idea of we are alone in your bed and in your room and we've
We also
closed the
get-
door.
In Paper Rings, like I lay awake and watch you sleep.
Yeah. So that we're getting that picture of being with your new love alone in bed, right? And the idea, drew a map on your bedroom ceiling means you're lying in bed.
Looking up, yeah.
Looking up. And then it's, no, I didn't see the news because we were somewhere else. So this whole idea that like mentally and emotionally and maybe even physically you are out of touch with
Maybe
reality.
dreaming.
Dreaming or just shut off from the world, which then gets us into the vision, the imagery of where they feel like they are.
Your imagery of lying in bed looking up at the ceiling had me thinking about right after that. She's like, because we were somewhere else. So imagining two people just lying in bed, looking up at a map, and then envisioning all these things in dream world. We could be here. We could be
the
there. We
other
could be going.
thing this refers to, Lavender Haze, staring at the ceiling with you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting to me that Lavender Haze and this song are on the same album.
Well,
I think I said that in the last episode.
Yeah, well, this one was in her like 3 a.m. whatever.
Yeah.
It wasn't on the core album, which I kind of understand because I feel like she used a lot of this feeling and emotion in Lavender Haze.
You know what that means? They've been staring at the ceiling for 3 hours.
That broke Jody. She was so near the edge of breaking, and that was it. That was the final blow. The other thing I like about the imagery of stumble down pretend alleyways, it also makes me think of
being drunk.
It was in Lyon, so sorry to Paris, but one of my favorite nights in Lyon. So we went to France last summer to go see the Tour de France. We were with a group of people. Long story short, Chris and I ended up breaking off and having dinner, just the two of us one evening, and we just wandered around Lyon. Like literally we're just wandering around it. And it was like one of my favorite moments of the whole trip because it was just the two of us just exploring the city. It was super fun. And it made me think about like that imagery of stumble down pretend alleyways reminded me of that very specific moment in my life, but also then just kind of like the idea of when you're stumbling down alleyways, you're often kind of trying to find your way. Like you don't stumble down an alleyway when you have a very specific purpose, you know, where you're going. And it made me think too of that early relationship of you're exploring the nooks and crannies of your relationship. You're exploring the nooks and crannies of each other. You're going down the alleyways of your hearts, you know, like that kind of metaphor I thought was really interesting. And sometimes you stumble your way into things in your relationship too. And it's not the main street. You're getting into the side stuff. You're getting into the small things, which is kind of cool.
I don't know if it's because the song is called Paris on an album called Midnights, but the imagery that I've always gotten with this song is a scene from the movie Midnights in Paris.
Yes, I was going to bring that up as well.
Yeah, like Owen Wilson and maybe Tom Hiddleston was in this scene, but they're literally stumbling down some cobblestone steps after a party. It's late and they're drunk. And yeah.
I also, continuing the feeling, Jen, you were just saying how stumble down pretend alleyways is like something you do in a relationship, metaphorically speaking. Then you get, I was taken by the view. And the next line is the chorus, like we were in Paris. So you're meant to think that they've like a beautiful view of something like Paris, but I think it's just of the person she's with in bed. I was taken by the view of this person that I am with. And this in the chorus, like we were in Paris, like we were somewhere else, like we were in Paris, oh, we were somewhere else. I mean, this is a classic simple Taylor Swift chorus lyrically, but also is more complex when you actually look at it because this is the metaphor. This is where you finally understand that she's making a comparison, a metaphor, that it feels like she's in Paris, but she's just here in this room falling in love with this person.
I will say too, so we ran out of time in the last episode as Monzi and I were fighting, and Jody was stressed out for the points that I was going to make, and I'm going to make it now.
Oh,
the first few times I went to Paris, because I have been incredibly fortunate enough to have gone a couple of times. The last time we went, I had very much made a list of these are things I really want to do. And they were not, I mean, Musée d'Orsay was on there, which is a pretty popular one, but I wanted to go to a cemetery. I wanted to go to some very random restaurants.
I think the first problem is that you're making a list of things to do in Paris.
Okay,
Oh,
moving on. Get to the point. Let's go.
Oh, that's... And you want me to exist without a list, I'll just crumble and die. But this last time, I was really focused on, like, what did I want to do? What made sense? What were things that really interested me? And so instead of doing Paris the way I was, quote unquote, supposed to, I did things that really interested me. And I had a lot more fun, which seems obvious. But when you're going to a big city, you tend to just be like, oh, I need to go see, like, the big things that everyone sees. And having gone enough times, I was able to do it my own way.
Yeah.
And that was really a lot more enjoyable. So I think that part of the metaphor makes more sense as we're really deep diving this of, I don't know if this is the way it's meant, but the idea of being in Paris can mean a lot of things. But if you're being in Paris the way everyone else is, that might not always work for you. It might be a letdown. But if you're, quote unquote, in Paris in a way that makes sense for you, it'll be a different experience. So there's a lot of ways to be in Paris.
It could also hint at a familiarity, like the idea of them drawing maps up on the ceiling or fantasizing about something. Maybe it's a city that they're familiar with and you can go imagine there. And with that kind of familiarity comes a different kind of intimacy. When you get to know any city more intimately, like you have different experiences with it. And this does give this sense of you're fantasizing about being somewhere else, but maybe in a really personal or intimate kind of way.
Well, speaking of intimacy, we get into privacy sign on the door. Yeah, this part is really interesting to me. And on my page and on the whole world, romance is not dead if you keep it just yours.
I wrote, TLDR, we're alone, don't bother us.
Well, privacy sign on the door is an immediate call out to, like, a hotel, a do not disturb sign.
And on my page.
So that's what's interesting to me. Privacy sign on the door is a very temporary thing. That's when you're in a hotel. That's when you don't put a privacy sign on your door in your permanent residence unless it's your college dorm and you need to tell your roommates what's going on, But then on my page, very interested on that. And then on the whole world, still not sure about on my page, but then on the whole world is saying, this is not temporary. I'm saying to everyone, this is none of your business.
On my page, I see as the speaker is a writer. I'm not going to include this in my writings. I'm not including it maybe in things I'm publishing or even maybe it's even a personal writing, like a journal or something, but it's like,
not your Facebook
you're not
page
documenting
or your MySpace page. Or it could be.
It could be.
It's the same thing. You're not documenting it. You're not sharing it. This is not to be shared.
Yeah, and maybe it's like living in the moment and less about writing it down or whatever.
Well, romance is not dead if you keep it just yours, right? The way to keep romance alive is to not share it with with the world.
Levitate above all the messes made. Sit quiet by my side in the shade, not the kind that's thrown. I mean the kind under where a tree has grown.
Levitate is a very interesting word choice.
See, and it gives me lavender haze. It gives me that surreal, like,
and that's
floating,
why I think it
which
wasn't
is so
on
interesting.
The core album.
Yeah.
But it still, to me, feels very dreamlike state.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or you're on a high is another idea.
Levitate.
Like that's the lavender haze reference. It's like you're floating, you're on a high, you're above whatever is going down in the world of the mundane.
It also makes me think the levitate of Peter Pan, and you think happy thoughts, and that's how you fly.
That's cute. I
you don't usually
light as a feather, stiff as a board. Maybe she's wood.
I was going to say there's not a ton of examples in literature. You found one of the exceptions, but usually flying is something good. Like you don't fly because you're sad. Like it's going up, being uplifted.
Well, levitating has a sense of happiness, rising, and elation, right? Like even I am not
good word.
I never took Latin, but I would imagine that elation and being inflated. She's Googling. I see her Googling.
I am.
Levi corpus is what came to mind to me. And that is actually one of the rare negative references in literature.
Wingardium Leviosa.
The original Latin is elat, which is raised.
But yes, to your point, Jen, it is positive. It is like there is a joy to it and not a sadness. Because if you're being literally happiness, you're lifted up. Yes.
Levitate comes from the Latin levis, which means light.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lightness. Yeah.
Light as a feather, stiff as a board, like you said.
See? Like I said, me and my 5th grade sleepovers. Anyway.
I just got this mental imagery of like one of my friends' mom running out yelling at us when we were doing that at a slumber party one time because she thought we were doing witchcraft.
Because you were. You saw it in Practical Magic.
I didn't see it anywhere. I just did whatever the kids told me. But yeah, she came running out and she's like, not in my house.
Oh my gosh.
Anyways. We talked about this a little bit in the last one, but like at the very end of Paris also being one of those places where time kind of stops and stands still. And this imagery of being above, kind of flying. And then even with the shade, like sit quiet by my side in the shade, not the kind that's thrown, but under this tree, you get this really peaceful kind of imagery and this sense that time has stopped or you're above what's happening and you're kind of in a different universe. And so I do get this feeling of being out of the hustle bustle and just being in your own world.
Well, it's interesting. So in the last episode too, we talked about New York City, London, and Paris. And for all 3 of those cities, one of my favorite things to do in all of them has been to go to one of the public parks and just kind of camp under a tree and just kind of people watch.
Yeah.
It is a little bit quieter. It is a little bit of a step away, but you're still in the city. You're still, you can go right into it. But all of these cities do have these like built-in
Beautiful
areas
parks
of rest and respite, which is interesting. With big trees, because they're old cities. It's a tree that is truly grown and has shade. It's not something new.
Yeah, she specifically calls out by my side in the shade and not the kind that's thrown. I mean the kind under which a tree has grown.
The whole section together, too, is very much the tree imagery is interesting because it's putting down roots. It's something solid. It's something real. It's something that requires time to grow. And it in some ways reminds me a little bit of the lakes where we have the rose grew under...
A red rose grew up under ice-frozen ground with no one around to
tweet it. So we're again
what happens when we deep dive these songs. I'm like, it is in my bones. I got this.
I was like, I need to get the line started. But we have this society and people and technology and a lack of privacy. And then we have nature and rest and romance and intimacy. Those are like on 2 separate sides of the equation. Again.
What the interesting thing about the nuances of the words would sit quiet by my side is that she's telling the other person
to be quiet,
whatever the you speaker is in the shade, and then not the kind that's thrown. So I wonder just like in the past or like, has it been like in past relationships where she's always throwing shade? Because the fact that she needs to clarify that is really interesting.
You have You Need to Calm Down because shade never made anybody less gay. That's the only other time that she's like used that phrase.
Yeah. I mean, we know she's a master of shade and throws it regularly, but I think the fact that she's maybe referring to this other person to sit by her side in the shade, it seems silly that she would need to clarify not the kind that's thrown if it's in a relationship.
Well, if we take it in the context of the full, I was going to say paragraph, verse, she's saying, I want to shut out the world. I don't want to share this. Because maybe if she did share this and talk about her relationship,
they would get shade.
They would get, and shade is negative, like negativity, hate. Like that's what we're talking. That's what she means by the other type of shade.
Yeah,
and she
actually, that makes sense because it's by my side,
right?
So it could
sit
be like
by my
both
side
of them
under this like actual beautiful tree, this space where we can be alone, not sitting by my side under the hate and negativity that we're gonna get for being in this relationship. The part that I love about this is she's telling the partner to be quiet, sit quiet by my side in the shade, like just be quiet.
Well, too, in the context of the whole song, it starts out with someone telling her, like, oh, I have this hot goss, and her being like, no, I didn't, but thanks, though.
That's true. That's the contrast.
And the rest of the song is her kind of responding to that in some ways of, like, I didn't. I'm so in love. I'm in Paris. I don't know what you're talking about. So I don't even know if it doesn't really matter who was telling her the gossip, but it seems like a general response to people who are like, oh, let's talk about what everyone's doing, where she's saying, like, no, I'm in love. I'm going to sit in the shade, not that shade that you're literally just talking about, but one that's a tree, that we're going to be quiet. We're going to be, again, away from Twitter, away from, all of this constant conversation, and we're going to be in nature, and we're going to be quiet. We're going to be together.
Yeah. We should have done this for eco-criticism, apparently.
Well, then the chorus repeats, so in love that might stop breathing, drew a map on your bedroom ceiling. Then we get into the bridge.
I want to brainwash you. That is how she starts the bridge. It is a very interesting choice of words yet again.
Very
Way to read the bridge.
disconcerting.
Should we start through? Let me just read the whole bridge. I want to brainwash you into loving me forever. I want to transport you to somewhere the culture's clever. Confess my truth in swooping, sloping, cursive letters. Let the only flashing lights be the tower at midnight in my mind.
It's also giving very masterminds, cryptic and Machiavellian because I
Well,
care, scheming like a
Worse,
criminal
because
ever since.
brainwash.
Yeah.
And loving me forever is weird. Like, of all the things to brainwash, it's like, you are getting sleepy, love me forever.
Yeah, it's
We're already levitating,
manipulative.
so we just have
Gonna
some
keep
sort
going,
of
just run
story
with
going
it?
on.
We're just gonna run with it.
it.
I also wrote down that like the whole I want to transport you to somewhere the
Yeah.
culture's clever was love makes them feel transported.
Well, I thought previously in the earlier lines when they're lying in bed, drawing maps and being somewhere else, I got the idea that they were somewhere else together or they were dreaming up this place together. And now in the bridge, I get this sense that they're not actually there together. It's all in her head. She is somewhere else with this other person, but that other person may not be on the same page. She explains that the culture's clever, which is interesting because there's a lot of clever places in the world, but she chose Paris.
Paris has been the home to some of the greatest artists and thinkers.
Anyway, confess my truth. I loved the imagery here in swoop, the imagery and also the way that I don't know. There's a word here in language. In swooping, sloping, cursive letters. It's like
the repetition
onomatopoeic almost of like you get the sense of what the picture she's painting with the words that she's using.
Yeah.
But all of this is about being in love, but like to the extreme because she wants to brainwash and transport someone.
I almost like question, why do you want to go where the culture's clever? Like, why, like, what is it trying to say, I want to transport our relationship into something more sophisticated? Like, I'm almost trying to understand that.
If you go back to the opening, the
Yeah, I was wondering
mundanity
Yeah.
of your ex-friend's
This
sisters
world.
met someone, of where she is in her life, this speaker, that's not clever. This is mundane, irrelevant, repetitive, superficial. And I think nobody is disputing the intellectual, like that Paris as an intellectual and artistic center of the world. Period. End of sentence.
Jody's fear of our fights
like,
is really coming through.
The fact that
PTSD.
this person needs to be brainwashed to be transported
Yeah.
there is
Yeah,
like
it's
really
not good.
interesting.
That's not good.
It feels like there's just a misalignment. It's like one person wants to stay in mundane land.
No, I think what it is if this is literally the beginning of a relationship that she's saying, I'm so in love that I might stop breathing. It is, you will do anything to make sure that you guys are on the same page and that this is not going to end, that this is, you're going to love me forever and we're going to go someplace where
I feel a little bit of a power play. It's almost like I want to take you somewhere more sophisticated. Like I want to I want to brainwash you and take you somewhere better and blow your mind.
I think I did something bad where she says I flew them all around the world and let them think they saved me.
Yeah.
Where she's talked about like taking these playboys, these narcissists all over the world and like faking it basically with them. But this one seems sincere. She wants to take this person somewhere, but wants them to be obsessed with her. It also mildly gives me like cuteness aggression where you're just like, I love you so much.
I see this more on the cuteness aggression or like beginning of a relationship stage of like, I want this to be ours and I want to protect it and I want it to be in this lavender haze love fest forever. And how am I going to do that? By whisking us away someplace, taking us away from our everyday, and by making sure that you're going to love me forever.
So actually, like continuing to read, it's funny how like every line evolves a meaning, but let the only lights be the tower, the only flashing lights be tower at midnight, actually to me helps clarify this a little bit because it's like mundane world is being equated maybe to having to share with other people, the shade being thrown. Flashing lights we've discussed in previous songs as like media
Wonderland.
paparazzi,
Yes.
Wonderland, being chased. And so this idea of I want to take us somewhere more sophisticated where it's pretty and romantic and like this is the only flashing lights we have can also feel like escaping just like their discussing reality. And maybe the reason that she says brainwash is like maybe the other person is naive about it, or maybe the other person doesn't feel like there's as much of a threat here.
Brainwash is like, again, I see it as I think cuteness aggression was like the really good way to put it, Jen. It's an extreme word that really just means I just want to make sure you never stop loving me.
But it does suggest, what it does suggest is like the other person might not be like totally on the same page. Like the fact that they even need brainwashing or convincing.
Because you need to make sure that they are. And it's interesting that I want to continue what you were saying, that I loved your comparison of the flashing lights from Wonderland and from 1989 to here, except that this ends with let the only flashing lights be the tower at midnight in my mind.
In my mind.
So it's still not like I want to take you. It's still metaphorical. It's still protecting you, but there are no flashing lights. This almost
metaphors. Like confirms that though of the like difference between the two. It feels to me like the other person is just blissfully unaware of the realities that the speaker might have to deal with.
Correct.
And so we're dealing with the speaker being, how do I protect you from this and take you away and shield you? But it's all like in her head because she's the one that has to think about it.
Which again, huge Lavender Haze vibes. Talk your talk and go viral. I just need this love spiral. Like it feels like she is the one that is aware of what is at stake here out in the world, which is why she just wants to stay in this space of falling in love and not letting it get out into the world.
Well, and if someone is fully brainwashed into loving you, the risk of the reality of the mundane breaking the relationship is much lower. It's almost like, can I take those outside factors away? If you are brainwashed, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what else happens. It doesn't matter if shade is thrown. It doesn't matter what people say. If you are like fully brainwashed into this, there's no risk for me. No one's going to scare you off.
It's Midsummer Night's Dream when they get the...
That's such a good comparison.
Oh, you're
this song had so many uses.
and like, I know we end again at the same chorus that we've already talked about, but one difference in the very second to last line is then she actually addresses the other person and says, my love, we were in Paris. So it's almost like she's now explaining.
She's now bringing him in, person in. Ooh.
It also changes. It's no longer like we were in Paris. It's because we were in Paris.
Oh, so they need
It's not like we were somewhere else. We were somewhere else. My love, we were in Paris. Yeah.
So that really also changes the time period as well. Because if it's like we were in Paris, it's, to your point, Jen, it's a metaphor. But here, because we were in Paris, so now it's as if she's looking back on they made it to Paris.
I feel like there's a reading of like they actually went to Paris, but I also think there's...
I agree.
And they drank champagne. They were no longer drinking cheap wine, making believe it was champagne.
Yeah. So like maybe they actually made the trip, or it's our relationship made it. We didn't. I was successful. I transported you.
Well, that's
our relationship got to the point where it wasn't. Well, our relationship got to the point where it's not like, oh, it's like we were in Paris. It's my love. We did it. We are in Paris. We have reached that stage of the relationship, of romance, of love.
Dare I ask, Jen, which Paris they're in?
I actually like
the one that's their own way.
Well, I like, to me, like I like the interpretation of like they were there maybe at some point and then have come back to reality, and in her head she's still in Paris, or thinking like they're in Paris, but it almost feels like an anxiety thing, right? Of like, how do I make sure we feel like we are still in Paris? Like the whole song is, how do I do that?
How do I get us back there to that feeling?
How do I get us back there? And then at the end, I think she's bringing the person in, and because things were different because we were there. Now we're here. There's a difference. I feel like there's like some convincing of the other person that like this is what has changed. But I also can see both readings.
Yeah, same. It does. I feel like you do that sometimes as a couple, of like you have like some of those core memories where you're like, oh, remember that? Everything was so great. You can do that sometimes of just like, do you remember this trip? Like, oh my gosh, that was incredible. What a good time. Vacation mode, you're not thinking about work. Yeah, you're reminiscing. You're reminiscing about a special memory. I mean, relationships, romantic or not, at the end of the day, there's so much about them, but they're really a culmination of memories that you've made together. And so remembering a place you went is a core part of any relationship. Of, do you remember that time we were like, that's what you do.
Now I have mine in my head. Do you remember all the city lights by the water? Another city song. The purpose of the song. Who wants to go first?
I can go first because I think I already kind of started saying it, so I'll just maybe tie a bow on it. But yeah, I think now this song to me actually about some of the anxiety that comes with a new relationship, and which is maybe, I don't exactly remember where we landed with Lavender Haze, but I feel like if Lavender Haze was the lightness of being in a new relationship and floating, whatever, I feel like this is a little bit about anxiety, and maybe there was a time where they were in Paris and it was great, and now it's you're back to reality, and there's this, in my head, I am still there. How do I get us there? The speaker is scheming and obsessed. It feels like an obsession where the speaker is how do I get us there, or make sure that we protect that sanctity of whatever experience we had in Paris. And then I think at the end, it's trying to bring that to the person also, and being this situation is not different. Maybe there's at the end an acceptance that we're in a different place from where we were, and Paris was different, this is different. I think it's, I'm reading some anxiety into this.
I see this as a romanticization of love and romance, and wanting to protect the early stages of romance. And I think, as chaotic as the previous episode got about Paris, I think she's using the metaphor of Paris for this romanticized ideal of being in love. And to your point, Monsi, there's this need to protect the relationship by going someplace else and by keeping it to yourselves. And that is what Paris represents. It represents keeping the romance in the early stages alive, and keeping it as something that is just for the two of you.
Yeah, I definitely get the anxiety in this because, yes, we had many debates, but at the end of the day, all of this is really impossible. You can't completely keep your relationship private. You can't completely sit in the shade of a tree, just the two of you forever. Paris, good or bad, the idealized version of Paris where everything is perfect and everything is clean and everyone is super nice isn't real, because that's just not how the world works. That everything about this song is very much impossible, and I feel like, as always, the bridge is what tells us the author knows this. That there's painting all this, I'm so in love, this is so incredible, but then there's this moment of okay, but this doesn't mean that the love isn't real, but the situation or the isolation of it is impossible to maintain.
Unrealistic.
And so, what do you do with that? And, it ends with we were in Paris. It's either, I'm still not sure if the ending is saying we had it for a moment, we want to go back, or it's a doubling down of, no, we're going to do this. We will, strong arm our way into this. I'm not sure, actually, how I feel about that last and where it ends.
It's almost hopeful.
I think if we're going with the interpretation that even Paris can't be as perfect as we think it is, it's just a romanticization, then that's why I kind of went with the backward looking, maybe it felt that way, but now we're out of there. But yeah, I do like that parallel of if reality is not that perfect, then how can you get there? How could you get there? You know that it's going to be different.
The purpose of the song feels to me like someone who is falling in love, not for the first time, but in a way where it feels like it could last. And the anxiety is, okay, but long-term, how does this look? And I can say that was true for me. The long-term reality of being in love was just kind of different than what I expected. It's still great. It's very fun to be in love, but it's not heady love all the time. And I think we know this now. I think the narrative is changing. We grew up on the early Disney princess movies where there wasn't a lot of nuance in love stories, at least. But there's a movie that Rebel Wilson's in called Isn't It Romantic? I believe.
I love that movie.
It's
oh my
fun.
God.
And I think that's kind of what I'm in. So she wakes up in a rom-com, and New York City's perfectly clean, and she has a massive apartment, and everything is cute little local shops, and everyone's super friendly. And I think that is kind of what I was getting at with Paris, that sometimes Paris is represented that way.
Yeah.
And that's not what it is, and there can be kind of a letdown. I love Isn't It Romantic, though, because at the end she goes back to her normal New York life and she's thrilled at her tiny apartment in the dirty streets because it's real and that's what matters. I think I just, for the sense of hope, choose to believe that the end is saying we weren't Paris, but they've readjusted Paris to no longer be the idealized Isn't It Romantic version. It's the version that does have trash on the streets, that does kind of smell in the metro, but it's still beautiful. It's something they've still found together. It's just not what they thought it would be, and that's still okay.
It's the I want your midnights, but I'll be picking up bottles with you on New Year's Day.
Yeah. I'm choosing to believe that, but I'm not 100% sold that that's exactly what it is, but that's what I'm simply choosing to believe.
We all each get to interpret as we would like.
And I think all interpretations are valid, so...
As are all interpretations of Paris. Anyway, with the city. I meant the city.
I said so many nice things about Paris this episode. Last episode was very dramatic, but I said nice things this time.
We should add a disclaimer and be like, hi,
We
if
apologize.
you're Parisian, please listen to the next episode.
Hi, City of Paris. Please sponsor us. I swear we'll be nicer.
Although I feel like for things I've seen, no one complains about Paris more than Parisians, but also no one will defend Paris as much as Parisians. So honestly, isn't that everyone though? I complain about the city all the time, but if someone insults it, I'm like, hey,
yeah, you're gonna be like, excuse
probably
me,
right, but no,
you haven't earned the right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that, well, that's one of the reasons that I also loved our city episode so much, is like the duality of cities.
Yes.
I think every city has these extremes, and that's kind of what makes it so awesome.
Yeah. All right. Catch us next time on AP Taylor Swift when we fight about something new.
That's all we have for you today on AP Taylor Swift. Be sure to rate and review us on your favorite podcast app. Follow us on your social channel of choice at AP Taylor Swift to stay up to date. And join us next time as we overanalyze and deep dive into the next Taylor Swift song on AP Taylor Swift.